name is Ashley Hunter, and I did a lesson over figurative language for a middle school 6th through 8th grade classroom. The reason why I did not record in the classroom was because it was protected. The student's privacy is their top priority, and so my teacher did not allow me to film something in class, but I did present this last Tuesday, and so I'm going to go through the slideshow that I presented. The main issue that we found in our class was that when it came to their writing, they didn't understand how to incorporate figurative language, and so I focused my lesson primarily on the figurative language, just going over it again so that they had a nice opportunity to, relearn what has already been taught in the 5th grade, 6th grade, they touch on it, but definitely they should learn it and know it and be able to use it in 7th and 8th grade. So, figurative language. Literal versus figurative language. Literal language means that it's actually happening, and it's exactly what is happening in real life, is happening in this story. There is not an exaggeration in this, and there aren't any ways to misinterpret what is happening. Figurative language is the opposite, so this is stuff that is not actually happening or it's exaggerated. Examples of this include phrases, it's raining cats and dogs. It's not actually raining cats and dogs, but obviously that means that it's raining a lot outside. We had a little activity that I did. We did literal versus figurative, so all the kids had to go through these sentences, and as a class, we decided if it was figurative language or if it was literal language. The first one, Grant always turns in his homework. That one is kind of a tricky one because it can be literal language because he's always turning it in, has never missed an assignment, but that word always can make it a little difficult for students to pick out if it was literal or figurative. Number 2, the water was rising in the river because of the rain. That is just literal. That is a statement that can be true and is true very often. 3, her teeth are like stars because they come out at night. That is figurative language. Her teeth do not just come out at night, and they're not like stars, but they are like stars in a similar point of view. When she sings, her voice is like velvet. Another example of a simile using that like or as. The kids really understood and knew how to use simile really well, but they struggled a lot with metaphors. Half of the class did not complete the assignment. That's literal. That's a very easy stat to fit, and I know that especially now in college, we definitely see that stat a lot more. I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. That's figurative, it's a hyperbole. Okay, and then this went on for the next slide as well. We went through some more examples. Then we saw this picture, the little cartoon, and it's really cold outside, and I asked the students to identify it being cold outside, and how they knew it was cold outside by the coats and the scarves and the hats, and then what fell off? His butt, because he's freezing his butt off, and the kids really enjoyed that. So then we went through the 7 types of figurative language. There's more, but these are the ones that they see the most in a middle school classroom. And they actually spell out a good little word right here in order for them to help them remember it. And it's shampoo. So you see similes, hyperboles, alliterations, metaphors, personification, onomatopoeia, and oxymorons. And then there's some fun pictures of people using shampoo. And then we went over those 7 types of figurative language, just with using some examples and using the definition. And then I had the students come up with an example of their own, and they did think, pair, share. So we took about 5 minutes of doing that. Well, probably 3 minutes doing that for each of these 7 types. So they're positioned in groups already, so they just turned to their neighbors and they thought of an example, and then if anybody wanted to share, they were able to share out, and then we would go on to the next one. Hyperboles. And we talked about alliteration and poetry mainly because that is one of the easiest ways of seeing alliteration, just besides like doing nicknames or anything like that. So I wanted to bring in some outside context. The students that attend this school, it's a private Christian school, and they don't spend a lot of time in poetry in middle school, but I remember that being a really big thing for me in middle school, and I loved learning about it and learning how to write it, so I wanted to incorporate it. Metaphors we spent a lot of time over just because they understand similes really well. And this isn't strange to me. I remember also struggling with metaphors versus similes just because they are both comparisons, but one uses like or as and the other one does not. So it was always hard for me in middle school to come up with examples of similes or versus metaphors. But after we went through it and had a few examples, the students were able to kind of see the difference and understand it. And personification they actually like a lot. It's one of their favorite types of figurative language. They really like putting those different human qualities to things that are not human. Onomatopoeias. They pretty much understood what this meant. We had to go through the definition, and then after me reading the definition, they came up with tons of different words that were onomatopoeias. Oxymorons. They thought this one was really fun just because of things that you're saying are the same, but obviously they're different, just like jumbo shrimp, act naturally. You're not supposed to act and then be natural at the same time. They really enjoyed these. And then we went through and we did some examples where the students would have to pick out what is the sentence showing. So the streetcars are like frosted cakes covered with snowflakes. That is a simile because it uses like, and the students were able to pick that out as soon as they saw like. The west wind dances down the road. That is personification. A train is a dragon that roars through the dark. That is a metaphor because it's making a comparison. And then we had a few examples of these. The students really liked the interactiveness. My main takeaway so far from my practicum teacher is that I wish she did more interactive things with the students. The students are either listening to her usually or they are just completing worksheets alone. That's not my style of teaching. I like the fact that students can be engaged with other people and their classmates and me and just get comfortable with the idea of sharing out loud. So I would like to put this, incorporate lessons like this in my future classroom. And then I included the keys, so we just went through that as well. I think if I was going to do this lesson again, what I would do is make it kind of like a game and have the students come up with the answers, write them all down with their partner, and then at the very end I could collect those as their formative assessment. and then read over them, make sure that they were right after the class ended. But during the class, we would go through and and find the answers all together, and then I would just make sure after they turned in their assignment that they were doing it correctly. And then the winning team probably would just win a piece of candy or something. I like that kind of reward system in the classroom. I just think it keeps the students engaged. And we had rewards all throughout high school too. In my French class, we used them whenever we played games like this and trying to conjugate verbs. And I really enjoyed the fact that after, even though we were juniors or seniors, we would still get a little piece of candy. Made it worth it. So just the key there. And then a little practice test. We didn't go this far. I didn't really feel like they needed a practice test just because they had already been introduced to figurative language. But what we did instead is, to close out, I had them write a little reflection and use an example of their favorite type of figurative language. So if any students like similes a lot, they would write a little reflection just over what they learned and how they're going to be able to use this in their writing. And then they would use an example of a simile, and they turned that into me as well. And that is what I did last Tuesday in my practicum class.